He glared at me from across the lecture hall, his voice cutting through the air like ice as he called out my mistake. No one would ever guess that just hours earlier, this same man had held me close, whispering that I was his entire world. This is our story, one of secrets, sacrifice, and a love that defies all expectations. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more unique content that explores the complex, hidden sides of relationships that we rarely get to see. The first time I walked into Professor James Mitchell's advanced literature seminar, I had no idea my life was about to change forever. I was 24, returning to finish my degree after taking time off to care for my ailing mother. He was 32, the youngest department chair in university history, with a reputation for brilliance matched only by his ruthlessness in the classroom. "Ms. Winters, if you can't be bothered to arrive on time, perhaps you shouldn't arrive at all," he said without looking up from his notes as I slipped through the door 2 minutes late. My face burned as 20 pairs of eyes turned to stare. I mumbled an apology and sank into the nearest empty seat, wishing the floor would swallow me whole. "Great start, Emma." "Just great." For the next hour and a half, I watched him command the room with effortless authority. His dark eyes missed nothing, his voice resonant as he dissected Dostoevsky with surgical precision. When he called on students, he expected perfection. When he didn't get it, his disappointment was palpable. "Your analysis lacks depth, Mr. Reynolds. I suggest more reading, less social media." The poor guy looked like he might cry. I vowed to stay invisible in his class. Just get through the semester, I told myself. But fate had other plans. 3 weeks into the term, I was working the late shift at Blackwell's bookshop when the bell above the door chimed. I looked up from restocking shelves to find Professor Mitchell standing there, rainwater dripping from his coat. "Professor," I said, surprised to see him outside the classroom. "Ms. Winters." He nodded, his expression softening slightly. "I didn't realize you worked here." "4 nights a week," I replied, suddenly self-conscious in my faded jeans and oversized sweater. He browsed for nearly an hour, occasionally asking my opinion on various titles. To my shock, he actually listened, nodding thoughtfully at my recommendations. When he finally approached the counter with a stack of books, something had changed between us. "You have excellent taste," he said, his voice lacking its usual edge. "Thank you." I smiled, feeling a strange flutter in my chest as our fingers brushed during the transaction. That night marked the beginning. He returned to the bookshop the following week, and the week after that. Our conversations grew longer, deeper. I discovered the man behind the intimidating Professor, James, who lost his parents young, who worked 3 jobs to put himself through school, who believed education was the greatest gift one could give or receive. 2 months later, he asked me to dinner. I said yes, despite knowing all the reasons I shouldn't. This could complicate things, he warned as we sat in a small restaurant 30 miles from campus. I know, I replied, but I didn't care. I was already falling for him. We kept our relationship absolutely secret. On campus, he was still the stern, demanding Professor Mitchell. In class, he critiqued my work as harshly as anyone's, sometimes more so. But in private, in the sanctuary of his book-lined apartment, he was just James. Tender, passionate, vulnerable James, who looked at me like I was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. "I hate being cold to you," he confessed one night, his head resting on my lap as I ran my fingers through his hair. But if anyone suspected— "I know," I assured him. "Your career, my degree. We can't risk it." The dual life was harder than I'd anticipated. Sitting in his class, feeling his deliberate distance. Hearing other students complain about Mitchell the Merciless while biting my tongue. Worst were the rumors about him dating a visiting professor from the English department, rumors he couldn't publicly deny without raising questions. 6 months into our secret relationship, I nearly broke. After a particularly brutal seminar where he'd torn apart my essay in front of everyone, I stormed into his office during his private hours. Was that really necessary? I demanded, tears threatening. He closed the door quickly. "Emma, you know I can't show you any favoritism." There's a difference between not showing favoritism and public humiliation. His expression crumbled. "You're right." I overcompensated. "I'm so sorry." He reached for me, but I stepped back. "Sometimes I wonder if this is worth it," I whispered. The pain in his eyes was immediate and raw. "Don't say that. Please." That night, he showed up at my tiny apartment with takeout from my favorite restaurant and a first edition of Jane Austen's Persuasion, the novel we'd bonded over during those early bookshop conversations. "I love you, Emma," he said simply. "I know this isn't easy. But you are worth everything to me." We made it work. For the rest of the semester, we maintained our careful balance. He remained strict but fair in class, and I accepted that this was part of loving him. The semester ended, and though I had other classes with him due to my literature major, the pressure eased somewhat. Then came the night that changed everything. We were having dinner at his place when his phone rang. He answered, his expression growing increasingly concerned. When he hung up, he looked shaken. That was Dean Harrington. Someone sent an anonymous email suggesting I'm having an inappropriate relationship with a student. My blood ran cold. "What did you tell him?" "That it's absurd. That I maintain strictly professional relationships with all my students." His hands trembled slightly. "Emma, they're launching an investigation." The next 2 weeks were hell. James was placed on administrative leave pending the investigation. I was interviewed by the ethics committee, where I lied through my teeth, insisting Professor Mitchell had never been anything but professional. We stopped seeing each other completely, terrified of being discovered. I lost weight. Couldn't sleep. My grades in other classes began to suffer. James looked worse each time I glimpsed him from afar on campus, gaunt, unshaven, his eyes haunted. The investigation found no evidence of misconduct, and James was reinstated. But the damage was done. The whispers followed him. Some students looked at him differently. His chances for the prestigious Whitmore Fellowship he'd been working towards seemed to evaporate. One night, I found him sitting in the dark in his apartment. "I'm resigning," he said flatly. "What?" "No, James, you can't. I've been offered a position at Berkeley. I'm taking it." My heart shattered. "California?" That's across the country." "Come with me," he said suddenly, turning to face me. "Marry me, Emma." I stared at him, stunned. "But, my degree." "I still have a year left." "You can transfer. Or take a break and finish later. Or we can wait, do long distance until you graduate. Whatever you want. I just know I don't want to live without you." It wasn't an easy decision. My whole life was here, my few friends, my mother's grave, the familiar comfort of the place I'd always called home. But James had become my home too. We were married in a small ceremony 2 weeks before he left for Berkeley. Only his brother and my aunt attended. I would join him after finishing the semester, then transfer to complete my degree. The day after our wedding, I walked into his final class. No one knew we were now husband and wife. He treated me exactly as he always had, with professional distance and high expectations. "Ms. Winters, your interpretation of wolf symbolism is interesting but lacks textual evidence," he said coolly when I spoke up during discussion. A girl next to me whispered, "God, he's such a jerk." I bit back a smile, thinking of how he'd kissed me that morning, how he'd whispered "I love you, Mrs. Mitchell" against my hair. The long-distance portion of our marriage was brutal. We spoke every night, but it wasn't the same. I missed him with a physical ache that never quite subsided. When I finally joined him in California 3 months later, it felt like I could breathe again. Life at Berkeley brought new challenges. I was now officially Professor Mitchell's wife, which raised eyebrows given our age difference and the fact that I was still an undergraduate. Some of his colleagues were coldly polite, clearly wondering what he saw in me beyond the obvious. "They think you married me for my brilliant mind and devastating good looks," James joked one night, trying to lighten my mood after a particularly uncomfortable faculty dinner. "Well, the devastating good looks part is true," I teased back, grateful for his ability to make me laugh even when things were hard. But there were darker moments too. An anonymous note left in his faculty mailbox: "We know she was your student." A senior professor who pointedly mentioned the university's ethics policies during a department meeting while staring directly at James. Through it all, James remained my rock. In public, he was still the serious, demanding Professor Mitchell. But at home, he was mine, tender, passionate, fiercely protective. He helped me study for exams, proofread my papers, though he refused to give me any special advantages in the classes I took with other professors, and believed in me when I doubted myself. "You're the most brilliant person I know," he would say, holding my face between his hands. "And I'm not just saying that because I'm madly in love with you." A year into our life at Berkeley, the whispers began to fade. James was making a name for himself with his groundbreaking research. I was excelling in my studies, on track to graduate summa cum laude. We were finding our footing, both as individuals and as a couple. Then I discovered I was pregnant. The timing wasn't ideal. I was in my final semester, James was in the middle of publishing his book, and we were still establishing ourselves in California. But the moment I told him, his face lit up with a joy I'd never seen before. "A baby," he whispered, placing his hand gently on my still flat stomach. "Our baby." The pregnancy was difficult. Severe morning sickness left me depleted. Complications arose that required bed rest during my crucial final months of school. James transformed before my eyes, becoming even more protective, taking on extra work to allow me to focus on my health and studies. He arranged for me to take my finals from home. He recorded lectures for me when I couldn't attend class. He sat up with me through nights of discomfort, reading aloud from my textbooks or simply holding me when the pain was too much. "You don't have to do all this," I told him one night as he massaged my swollen feet after a full day of teaching and faculty meetings. "Yes, I do," he said simply. "You're my wife. You're carrying our child. There's nothing more important." I graduated 3 weeks before our daughter was born. James pulled strings to have a small, private ceremony in our home since I couldn't attend the main commencement. When the department chair handed me my diploma, James couldn't contain his pride. "That's my brilliant wife," he announced, not caring who heard the emotion in his voice. Sophia Grace Mitchell arrived on a warm June evening, tiny and perfect with her father's dark eyes and my stubborn chin. The moment James held her, something in him softened permanently. The man who could reduce students to tears with a single raised eyebrow was completely undone by this 7-pound bundle. "I never knew I could love like this," he confessed, watching her sleep in her bassinet. "First you, now her. You've given me everything, Emma." Parenthood tested us in ways academia never could. Sleepless nights, the constant worry, the challenge of balancing James's career with my new freelance editing work and our family needs. But we faced it together, our bond growing stronger through each challenge. When Sophia was 6 months old, James was offered the Whitmore Fellowship, the same prestigious opportunity he'd lost back when we were first discovered. It would mean a semester in London, a chance to complete his second book with unprecedented resources and connections. "I'll turn it down," he said immediately. "I'm not leaving you and Sophia." You will do no such thing, I countered. We'll come with you. We'll make it work. And we did. We spent 6 months in London, navigating the challenges of a new city with an infant. James worked long hours, but always came home to us, often bringing little treats, a book for Sophia, flowers for me, sometimes just the warmth of his embrace when the day had been particularly long. In public, especially in academic settings, he maintained his professional demeanor. Students still found him intimidating. Colleagues still respected his sharp intellect and high standards. But those who looked closely might notice how his eyes softened when I entered a room, how he instinctively reached for Sophia whenever she was near. On the last night of our London adventure, we stood on the balcony of our temporary apartment, Sophia asleep inside, the city lights twinkling below us. "Do you ever regret it?" James asked quietly. "That first day in my class, if you'd known where it would lead, the secrecy, the scandal, the sacrifices, would you still have stayed?" I turned to look at him, this complicated man who had become the center of my world. The strict professor who challenged me intellectually. The devoted husband who supported me unconditionally. The loving father who read Shakespeare's sonnets as bedtime stories to our infant daughter. "I would choose you again," I said with absolute certainty. "Every time, in every life, I would choose you." He pulled me close, his public reserve completely gone in the privacy of our embrace. "I don't deserve you," he whispered against my hair. "Probably not," I teased, making him laugh. "But you're stuck with me anyway, Professor Mitchell." We returned to Berkeley, to our life together, stronger for having weathered another challenge. James continued to be Mitchell the Merciless in his professional life, maintaining the high standards that made him a respected academic. But his students might be surprised to know that this same intimidating figure spent Sunday mornings making pancakes in the shape of dinosaurs, or that he knew every word to the Itsy Bitsy Spider. 5 years into our marriage, at a faculty dinner, a new professor's wife asked how we met. "She was my student," James said simply, no longer afraid of the truth. "The most exceptional student I ever had." I squeezed his hand under the table, remembering all we'd been through to reach this point. "And he was the strictest professor I ever had," I added with a smile. "Still is, in many ways." Later that night, as we walked home hand in hand, James pulled me close. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For seeing past Professor Mitchell to find James. For loving both sides of me." I stood on tiptoe to kiss him, there on the sidewalk under the stars, no longer caring who might see. "Always," I promised. "In public and in private, always." Our story wasn't perfect. It wasn't always easy. But it was ours, a testament to the fact that love doesn't always come in convenient packages or follow the expected path. Sometimes the coldest exterior hides the warmest heart. Sometimes the strictest professor becomes the most devoted husband. And sometimes, The greatest love stories begin with "You're late to my class, Ms. Winters." If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel for more content that explores the complex, beautiful, and sometimes challenging nature of love and relationships. Remember that appearances can be deceiving, and that the people who challenge us the most might just be the ones who love us the deepest.